I know there's just a few of us now, but hopefully more people funnel in. So welcome to Danish at Bear Creek, week 7. It's our final week. Why is it Danish at Bear Creek? It's because a number of people have asked me, both in this class and outside, this question. Is Lego, the toy company, named after the Greek verb Lego, which I told you means to speak, but the more ancient meaning is to collect, to gather. So now we're thinking about Lego blocks. So I sent my team of intrepid journalists out, and the answer is no. This is from the Lego website. The name Lego is an abbreviation of the two Danish words leg godt, meaning play well. So it's not a Greek word, but I've seen other portions of their website where they acknowledge, yes, we know that there's a Greek word and a Latin word. We know it sounds a lot like it, but no, that's not where the name Lego came from. Now that that's out of the way, we can get back to our real class, Greek at Bear Creek. It's week 7. As I was saying, I'm really impressed that you guys have managed to stick with this class. It's quite a lot. It's quite a lot of content, but we've done a lot. So I want to sort of use this last class to finish up the first 5 verses and then kind of transition to when you're studying by yourself. So I'll go ahead and get started. Ego archo to mathema. Could you repeat? Ego archo to mathema. Okay, this is our schedule. As I said, this is 7 weeks. So we did the introduction, the alphabet, and now we've done John 1 through 4. We'll finish verse 5 today and kind of debrief the class. Last week, we did talk about cases a fair amount. We had sort of talked about them for the past couple of weeks, but we did that exercise where we were making sentences, and I talked about getting the feel for when to use what case. So we have o logos, which is the I case, when we have a subject. We have ton logon. This is the object. This is the thing receiving the verb. Then we have tu logu, which is sometimes used to indicate possession, but there are also certain prepositions that make the thing that case. And then this fourth case, to logo, which I've kept a mystery and will remain a mystery. It has certain uses, and it's also used with certain prepositions. I also broke to you the bad news that every noun has 8 forms. And how do we get 8 forms? We have 4 cases and 2 what's called numbers, either singular or plural. So if you multiply the number of singular or plural by cases, you get 8 forms. And we've mostly been looking at the singular. It's one of the nice things about John 1 through 5 is there's only one plural noun form. So we didn't have to get to it until last week. But there are these different forms. And the common pattern is that there is a stem, what's sometimes called a root, and an ending. So all of these share that stem in common, but they all have different endings. The other thing about this is that the article in front of the noun will change to match whatever case the noun is in. And this can sometimes be helpful. Not all nouns in Greek follow this pattern. This is masculine nouns that end in os. They follow this pattern. But there's a lot of other nouns that don't follow this pattern. There are even masculine nouns that follow this pattern. So the good thing is, sometimes you see a noun and you have no clue what it is. You've never seen it before. You don't know what case it's in. If you look at that article, the article will always be one of these 8 if it's the masculine article. So sometimes you see a word that you don't know what it is, but the article tells you, oh, this is the singular masculine me case. So I know that information about that now. We also did this activity with prepositions, where I talked to you about how most prepositions have a spatial kind of physical meaning. So we talked about ego erchome pros ton ikon, ego erchome is ton ikon, ego imi en to iko, ego erchome ek tu iku, and ego erchome apo tu iku. And all of these prepositions can be used by themselves, or they can be tacked onto the front of certain words. So instead of erchome meaning to come or to go, I can put in is erchome, and that means to enter. Just like that English word enter, we assume a certain direction, right? Or if you put up erchome, you get the word depart. Do you have a question?
It's sort of like the other languages they add things
Exactly.
like German.
Yes.
German,
German is notorious. Greek is not quite as bad. There's some reason I would say.
Well, I'm
But,
thinking of German. They
right.
add little things.
I would say it's not as excessive in Greek, but it's a similar
it's
concept.
Similar.
Yeah. So this week, as I said, we're going to finish up verse 5, and then we're going to kind of debrief the whole class. Okay. Normally we do ego akuo, but I have changed this to ego akuo ke lego. So could you repeat? Ego akuo ke lego. So normally I read through the first 5 verses. This time I'd like to pick someone who could also say the verses with me. So I'll say verse 1, and then you say verse 1, and we'll go through it together. So who's up to it? Who's feeling brave? There's only a few. Yeah, would you like to try? So I'll say it, and then I'll pass to you, okay? En archi in o logos.
En archi in o logos.
Good. Ke o logos in proston theon.
Ke o logos in proston leon.
Theon.
Theon.
Oh, I'm not sure. Okay. Ke theos in o logos.
Ke theos in o logos.
Excellent. Do you want to keep going? Okay. Utos in en archi proston theon.
Utos in en archi.
Great. Archi.
Archi. Proston theon.
Excellent. Panda di aftu egeneto.
Panda di aftu egeneto.
Και χωρίς αυτού εγένετο,
Και χωρίς αυτού εγένετο.
ουδέ εν ο γέγονεν.
Ουδέ εν ο γεγονεν.
Great. Εν αυτό ζωή είναι.
Εν αυτό ζωή είναι.
Και η ζωή είναι
Και η ζωή είναι
το φως των ανθρώπων.
το φως των ανθρώπων.
Great. Almost done. Και το φως
Και το φως
εν τη σκοτία φαίνει.
εν τη σκοτία φαίνει.
Και η σκοτία αυτό ου κατέλαβεν.
Και η σκοτία αυτό που
Κατέλαβεν.
κατέλαβε.
Great. Okay, round of applause for Kelly. That's quite a lot. Perfect. All right. Ego manthano. Could you repeat after me? Ego manthano. We're going to jump right into vocab and grammar. Okay, so we go to vocab. There's actually only 3 words that you don't know. You know most of the words in this. So we'll start with the noun I skotia. I skotia means, does anyone know what that word means? Let's go back to John 1, 1-5. And the light shines in the darkness. Exactly. So I skotia is darkness. Not too complicated of a word. This is the verb pheno. If you remember all the way back to week 2 when we were doing the alphabet, I had mentioned that if there's a word ending with that omega, very often it's a verb. And so that is what this is. It's the verb pheno. In the verse, the form is a little bit different. So we'll talk about the form when we get to the grammar section. But just for the vocab, this is the word pheno. And it means really to make something appear, to shine light on something. So it's often translated as shines, which is a perfectly good translation. But this word pheno, there's another form of the verb pheno, phenome, which is what we say when we're trying to say, yes, I appear, like I appear in front of you, you can see me. And you can even use it in this way. Miss Elizabeth appears to be very studious because she's taking notes as I'm writing. You would use that word phenome for that kind of appearance. And if you think of the English word phenomenon, what is a phenomenon? That comes from the same Greek verb, and it means something seen. So a phenomenon is something that someone saw, something that appeared. And you can kind of get into other ways that that word is used, something amazing that was seen, you know. But it all comes back to this verb, pheno, which doesn't purely just mean shine. You don't normally use this if you're talking about the sun or whatever. This is sort of like to cast light on something, to make it appear. But the word shine is a perfectly fine translation. Let's get to kata lamvano. If this looks slightly familiar, it's because I told you there's a Greek verb, lamvano, just the black part. And that is the simple word to take something, to pick it up, to say, I took this home with me from school. That's what lamvano means. So what is kata? Kata is another one of those prepositions, just like is and apo and ek and en. Kata generally means down. It means to go down something. So if I took the word kata and added it to erhome, I could say ego kat erhome kata ton oron. I descend the hill. So kata has this kind of like downward motion when it is used. But the funny thing about this preposition is in this word, it's not really meaning to take something downward. Maybe it could be used that way. It's kind of an intensifier. So it's sort of like adding strength, even violence. So if I say ego lamvano, maybe I pick this up. But kata lamvano is like this. It's like violence. It's like seizing something. And so we get to what this word means. Part of this word means the word apprehend, to seize someone. Sometimes in the Bible, it's even used kind of analogous to persecution, like where we're chasing someone to seize them, to take them strongly with violence. But metaphorically, it comes to mean to comprehend something, meaning you're explaining a concept to me and I take it into my mind. I understand it. I grasp it. And so if you take these two Latinate words, apprehend and comprehend, and kind of squish them together, that's what kata lamvano means. It has both of these meanings. And I liken it to the English phrase, get him. If there's like a thief running down the hallway, you say, get him. But if someone's trying to explain a concept to you, you might say, oh, okay, I get it. So this word get is sort of performing both of those functions. There's something shared. And that's what kata lamvano is. And that's why it's interesting. You see translations that will often say, the darkness could not overtake it, or the darkness could not comprehend it. I think I saw ESV says the darkness did not grasp it. And I like that one a lot, because you can grasp something physically, but you can also grasp, a concept or a term or something. But that's that kata lamvano has kind of both of those meanings together. Okay, now let's get into the grammar. There's really only these two forms that might seem unfamiliar to you. I'm not going to talk about katelaven, because that is a past tense form, and we haven't really gotten a chance to get into the whole system of past tense verbs, even though we've seen in and again until those are both past tense. But I want to spend a little bit of time on feni. Feni is actually a present tense verb. And so a good translation will say, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. So this is past tense. This is past tense, and this is present tense. It's an interesting part of the verse, and of course there's a theological meaning, but just from a grammatical point of view, I want to look at feni because we have this question. Pheno is the way that I taught the verb just now. Feni is the way that it shows up in the verse. So what is the difference between pheno and feni? So I will demonstrate. Ego imi o ilios. We all know what o ilios means, right? Ego imi o ilios. Ke ego pheno. Does that make sense? But now let's pretend I'm not the sun, and I'm Homer standing on the beach, and I'm pointing at the sun. And now I say, utos estin o ilios. Ke utos, I can't say pheno anymore, because I'm not the one doing the shining. So I have to say, ke utos pheni. So that is the difference. I would say, ego imi o ilios, ke ego pheno. But if I'm Homer on the beach, I say, utos estin o ilios, ke utos pheni. So that is a relationship between pheno and feni. This is the I am doing it. I am the one shining. This is someone else is doing the shining. And so you can't use the same word, right? Just like in English, we say, I shine, he shines. And those are two different forms. So this is the second kind of great truth that I can't hide you from any longer. All Greek verbs have 6 forms. And I put 6 in an asterisk because it's actually much more than that. But if we're just looking at present tense, normal kind of the way that you think, I run, I go, there's 6 forms. How do we get 6 forms? We have singular and plural, depending on who's doing it, right? So if I say I shine, great. But let's say I'm talking about me and my buddies. We all shine. It has to be a different form. And then we say I, you, or he, she, it. Who's doing it, right? Am I the one who's doing it? Are you the one who's doing it? And you have some familiarity with a verb like this, which is imi, right? I say ego imi because I'm talking about myself. But I say utos estin, I'm talking about someone else. And if I wanted to say we are students, there's a different form. So in Greek, just like in Spanish or in French, a lot of languages have verb conjugation. But that's what we're looking at. This is the form when you're talking about I in the singular, pheno. And this is the form pheni when we're talking about someone else in the singular. Now, it's important to know this because in dictionaries, in lexicons, you always find this form of the verb. So let's say you're reading John 5 and you see the word pheni and you type it into a dictionary. You might not get anything. Some dictionaries are smart, they'll kind of auto-convert. But if you look at something in the dictionary, you have to know, I'm getting the I singular form of that verb. So it would be right to say, I agapo you, but it would be wrong to say, he agapo something. It's like saying he am a dog. It's just like grammatically wrong. But we know, this is what the dictionary shows us. So there are other forms, depending, I said, on whether it's a first person I, second person you, or third person he, she, it. And we have singular and plural. As always, I'm not asking you to memorize this or write it down. This is it's very easily accessible. But there are different forms. Verb conjugation is similar to how nouns change. Same thing, right? We have a stem, fen, and we know what that stem is because the O, the omega, is the thing telling you it's a verb. So that's how you know what is the stem and what is the ending. So this fen will always stay the same when we're talking about the verb in this form. It's the endings that are different. I'm going to move on. I'm not expecting you to memorize the endings at all. But it's similar to Latin.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's very similar. But this is the I form, and this is the third person present. Could you get a question?
Is there like a neutral to be form, like in Spanish, like just ER?
There is. Yeah, there's an infinitive, and the way that you make it is you take this form and add a ni to it. So fenin would be the infinitive.
So that would have
form.
irregular verbs, right?
100%. And you know one already. Imi, right?
Yeah,
Imi is a very
imi,
irregular
yeah,
verb.
irregular.
Yeah, it's interesting, crew. For whatever reason in Spanish, when I was learning Spanish, you're given the infinitive. And
Yeah, so you're given the I form here?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of strange. I don't know why this is the case, but in Greek, in Latin, most ancient languages, this is sort of treated as the base form of the verb. I'm sure there's a good reason for it.
And we think we're individualistic.
Yeah, I honestly don't know why they do that, but it's something to look out for. Yeah, the infinitive is just if you add a ni to this, so you can find it. Lexicons are pretty opinionated. Some of them will have the infinitive just because I think that's what most modern languages use as the base form. But most classics dictionaries, I think even Strong's puts it in the I form. That's sort of standard. Okay, so remember I told you that if you see a noun, you can look at its form and you can ask certain questions, and based on the form of the noun, you can actually answer those questions. The same thing is true about verbs. This is a specific verb. It's not just a general verb. It's been changed to fit its context. So these are the questions we can ask about the verb. First, we can ask what tense it is. And you haven't really learned the different tense forms, but I'm telling you that this is present. So that's a question, and it is a present. You can also ask what person is it? First person means I, second person means you, third person means he, she, or it. And this is the third person, and that ending tells us that. And then you can also ask number. Are we talking about one person or multiple people? And again, this ending tells you it is a singular. So you can ask, what tense is it? It's a present tense. Who is the person? It's a third person. We're talking about someone else. And who's the number? One. It's a singular because we're just talking about false. So the light shines. Okay, I know that's a lot. We're going to jump back into verse 5, and I'm just going to demonstrate sort of the method that you could reorder a verse like verse 5 to make it a little bit more legible. This is how it starts. Ke tophos entiskotia pheni, ke iskotia afto u katelaven. The easiest thing is to take those kes and just make it two separate sentences. So now I've taken those into two separate sentences, two separate thoughts, kind of the same. The second strategy I told you can do is find the prepositional phrase, which is find the preposition and the noun that it governs, and you can kind of separate that off because those tend to be like separate units. So if we did that, that would be one change. And the second thing is, if we look at this clause now, what is the subject of this clause? I skotia. And we know that it's a subject because it's in that I case. So I skotia is the subject. So what is this then? It's got to be the object. It's got to be the object. Now, I had mentioned to you that a Greek tendency is to take the verb and put it all the way at the end, whereas an English tendency is to first have the subject, then the verb, and then the object. So the dog bites the cat. That's a very English sentence structure. So in Greek, you can just take the object and move it all the way to the end, and you will get a more English order. So I've done that here. Taken the prepositional phrase and moved it to the end so that the main action is by itself. And here I've taken the object and moved it to the end so that we have kind of an English order where we have subject, verb, object. Is that making sense so far? Yes, question.
Can the out of the he or it? Is it only the neuter?
We'll get there. It's a good question. It's a good question. Okay. Yes, the final thing that I want to talk about is this ou. If you remember, I often say ego imi anthropos uk imi theos. And I had said that ou and uk are the same word. Sometimes you use uk depending on whether the next verb starts with the next word starts with a vowel or not. That sounds complicated, but in English, when do you use a versus an? You say, I have a book and I have an egg, and it just depends on what sounds nicer. So u and uk is the same thing. So I could say ego uk imi theos, but I could say u theos imi. It just depends on what word is being used. So this is that same negative u, and it's going along with this verb, right? So instead of saying this subject katelaven, he succeeded, we're saying he did not. This is a negation of the verb, and that's why we translated the darkness did not comprehend it. Okay, final question, which is Joy's very important question. What does afto mean? I told you that that was the general word for he, she, it. Now, if I said he went to the park today, you don't know who he is. He always has to refer back to something, right? So if I said, this is my dog, he went to the park today. Okay, so he means my dog. So this afto goes back to tophos. How do we know that? And this is where Joy's question comes into place, because when I taught you the word aftos, I told you that it had three forms based on its gender. Aftos is the masculine form of the word. Afti is the feminine form of the word. Afto is the neuter form of the word. So if we see afto, it has to point back to something neuter. Even if we don't know what it is, even if we just saw this sentence, we don't know what afto is, but it has to refer back to something neuter. And in this case, the only neuter sort of candidate is tophos. Okay, that's all I have for that grammar. So, any questions on the grammar of that?
So they read the they're gonna read the sentence as though the verb is after the.
Yes, well, yeah, it's a good question. So one thing that you do want to do is once you've done all that reordering, once you read it and you understand it, you always want to go back to the original ordering because we don't want to just be stuck in our English order. We want to get a sense of how Greek order actually works, how it sounds.
Yeah, you gotta
But-
learn to read it.
Exactly. You want to read it. And now that you know what it means, you can read it in the order that's original order and kind of start getting some of these tendencies. Yes.
Do you have to repeat that K twice? Is there a different meaning when you have it twice, or just, is it saying and?
It's a good question. This is in the text, right? So John made this decision. We won't get into it too much in this class, but ke is kind of a versatile word, which you may know. It does mean and, but sometimes it can mean also, and sometimes it can mean even. And sometimes it sort of means like you're connecting two things, you know, this over here, this over here. In this usage, just because his grammar is not too complicated, I think it's normally just translated and.
It's not both and.
No,
Both,
no,
you know,
but
like
it
we
can
have
sometimes
these-
mean that.
Oh,
So that's what I'm saying. Yeah, sometimes ke something does mean both and. Sometimes a sentence will start with the word ke, and you're like, okay, well, you're not really saying and. You might be saying even or also. But in this case with the word, that sort of interpretation, it's normally interpreted as just sort of straight up ands, and that's why it's okay to do something like this.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be careful with that word, but like I said, that's sort of beyond our scope. Okay, that's the reorder, John. So I would like to do this as a class. Kelly did it very bravely by herself. I think I'm not gonna ask anyone to do that again. But this time, I just want us to say it out loud as a class. So I'll read the sentence out loud once, and then we'll all read the verse together, and we'll just go through the first 5 verses. There's strength in numbers here, but don't what's the word? Don't abandon your post here. Your classmates all need you together. So let's do it. I'll read it first, and then we'll all read together. Okay, we'll do that verse by verse. En archi in o logos. En archi in o logos. Ke o logos in proston theon. Ke o logos in proston theon. Και Θεός ειν ο λόγος. Και Θεός ειν ο λόγος. Ούτως ειν εν αρχή προς τον Θεόν. Ούτως ειν εν αρχή προς τον Θεόν. Πάντα δι' αυτού εγένετο. Πάντα δι' αυτού εγένετο. Και χωρίς αυτού εγένετο, ουδέ εν ο γέγονεν. Εν αυτό ζωή είναι. Και η ζωή είναι το φως των ανθρώπων. Και η ζωή είναι το φως των ανθρώπων. Last one. Και το φως εν τη σκοτία φαίνει. Και το φως εν τη σκοτία φαίνει. Και η σκοτία αυτό ου κατέλαβε. Και η σκοτία αυτό ου κατέλαβε. Excellent, excellent. All right, that's going to end the Greek section of this class. Evge o mathite, that's how you would say, well done, students. So I really would like you all to give yourself a round of applause. I know it's been a lot, but it's quite an achievement, right? And I want to recap our achievement real quick. From a vocab perspective, there are 23 unique words in John 1, 1 through 5. Unique meaning we're not counting different forms as different words. We use some additional words in speaking exercises, right? So we used imi and utos and ginome, some of these words. So I would say that you've been exposed to about 30 words over the course of the class from a vocab perspective. From a grammar's perspective, we spent a lot of time on nouns. We talked about gender, right? Male, female, neuter, number, meaning singular, plural. And we talked about case a lot. The case system in Greek is quite extensive. But we talked about that. We talked about verbs just most recently. I just told you that verbs have multiple forms, but I'm guessing you saw it coming. I'm guessing you saw this language conjugates verbs, nouns. I'm sure they conjugate verbs as well, and they certainly do. We did talk about word order because it's different in Greek. It's flexible, right? And then we spent some time talking about prepositions. So if you remember in the first class, I said I would be referring to this book when I was preparing the class. So this is a book of 52 chapters that goes through all of the grammar in Greek. And by my count, we covered about eight chapters. So that's like roughly 15%. So I would say you've been exposed to somewhere between 10 and 15% of all of Greek grammar from a biblical New Testament perspective. And then if you just look at the verses that we studied, John 1, 1 through 5, I would say you probably have learned something that you hadn't learned before. I should hope. So this is kind of our total accomplishment over the past 7 weeks. About 30 words of vocabulary, about 10 to 15% of Greek grammar. Some might say more, some might say less. And I do think that we've spent a lot of time in the first 5 verses of John. I will say, every time I listen to the first 5 verses of John in Greek, I just feel like someone's putting a blanket over me. I've listened to it so many times that it's just like a warm hug. It's the best. So I would say that's kind of a bird's eye view of everything that we've accomplished so far. This is a class where we spent 1 hour a week for 7 weeks. I didn't assign any homework. There wasn't really much work that you put into it, I'm guessing, besides showing up, which I know is a lot. But this is not how Greek is normally taught. It's not taught 1 hour a week with no homework and no exercises. So the fact that we've covered this much, I would consider a really great achievement. And I want to loop back to week 1 a little bit. What was the original goal of the class? It wasn't to be able to learn, all of Greek grammar or even 10%, or, from a vocab perspective. This was my goal. I wanted you to walk out of here by saying, I know how to read Greek like a child. What I meant by that was that if you take the Greek version of The Cat in the Hat, you can be that 4-year-old, that 5-year-old that says like, yeah, I know how to read. It's so cool. I just learned how to read. It doesn't mean that you can necessarily pick up Genesis 1:1 or the beginning of Jane Austen and fully understand all of it. But you've made this amazing start that, yes, this is a language that previously was like a set of hieroglyphics on a wall. I had no clue what anything was. Now I can make sense of it. Now I can start making some progress. So that was our goal for this class. And that's a lot, I would say, a little bit more moderate than, I want to learn 30 words of Greek, and I want to learn 10% of grammar, and I want to know how to read these verses. But I think that if you try to read John 1, 1 through 5 by yourselves in the Greek, you would probably understand a lot of it. Maybe you're one of those people that sort of fixates on the stuff you don't understand and it gets you down. But I just want to remind you that for the majority of you, it was just a wall of hieroglyphics. I showed you pictures of John 1, 1 through 5 manuscripts in week 1. I'm guessing you could read any of it. But now you are able to understand that's a noun, that's a verb, that's an article, that is first person. There's a lot. And more importantly, you already knew the content of what John 1, 1 through 5 is. Now you can match that content up to the words in Greek. So I did say that my sort of stated goal was I want you to be able to read Greek, but really I want you to be able to walk out of here and say, I know how to read the Bible in a different way. I think previously you all had access to lexicons, Strong's Concordance, Blue Letter Bible, all these things. But it's just different using those tools without knowing kind of the skeleton of the Greek language. What are you actually doing? You could compare it to the difference between like a paint by numbers artist and someone who studied drafting and studied, illustration, and now as a painter, they might their end result might look the same, but one person kind of knows the fundamentals of the craft. They know what they're doing, but the other person is really using tools to give them an artificial sense of accomplishment in a thing. Okay, I also know that this class is coming to an end. That's going to be tough for me to deal with, but I'll get over it. So I want to give you some resources to continue on. However, your relationship with Greek going forward is totally up to you. It's a difficult language. I hope that coming through this class, and based on the progress that you've made, you're able to see that it's probably not as impossible as you thought it was when John announced that someone was going to be teaching Greek. You've all made a lot of progress. So I'm giving you these resources, and I've kind of categorized them by the amount of effort or commitment that they take. So when I say lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight, I'm not really talking about complexity or difficulty. I'm more just saying, like, how much time investment does it take? So start with just the lightweight resources. You can rewatch all these lectures because they're on YouTube. And again, I can't stop saying this enough, but if you've listened to John 1:1-5 in Greek, everything that is sort of floating around, sort of free association in your mind, will start to settle in. If you just keep listening to it, give your brain some time to integrate all the things that I said. When I said Catalan-vano has two definitions, and they're both in play here, that is something that a Greek just gets because they know the word. For us, when someone teaches us that, it's hard to then just jump to John 5 and read it that way. It really does take some time to sort of immerse yourself in this verse, in this language. So this is very simple. Another thing you can do is do what we just did in class, right? Don't just listen, but actually recite it. Just read it out loud. And once you do that enough times, you'll find that you've started to memorize things. I bet you all know the phrase pros ton theon pretty well because it's there all the time, right? Di aftu egeneto. There's probably phrases that are in your mind now because you just heard me say them so often. So if you recite, memorize these verses in Greek, I think it's cool that you can even do that. So I think that's something that you could do. Just kind of hold this in your heart once the class is over. Some middleweight resources that require a little bit more work. I think is it Gwen? Did you tell me about Greek for All? Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube whose channel is called Greek for All, and he has a playlist of all of Greek grammar. So I think that's a helpful resource. There's different ways that you could approach learning, right? You know some vocab and some grammar. So it might make sense to memorize more vocab and learn more grammar. And that's one way. If that appeals to you, then there are plenty of resources out there. If you don't really want to do that, a more kind of organic, like autodidactic way of teaching yourself is to alternate reading the English and the Greek one verse at a time. If you just keep alternating back and forth, you kind of learn vocab the way we did. I never said the sentence, "E scotia" means darkness. I asked you guys, what do you think "E scotia" means based on your English knowledge? And you were able to say, oh, it must mean darkness because I know the verse. So this is the great thing about doing this side by side with verses is instead of doing, looking up things in dictionaries and making flashcards, the fact that you already know the English verse and it means so much to you because it's the Bible, that'll actually function as kind of a working lexicon in a much more fun way. So I want to demonstrate this approach using John 1:6. This is the first time you're seeing it, I'm guessing. This is John 1:6. So this is the very next verse after the one we just looked at. And I'll read both the English and the Greek for you. There came a man sent from God whose name was John. Okay. Egeneto anthropos apestamenos paratheou onoma afto Ioannis. You just keep doing this back and forth, and your mind will start doing certain things. First of all, you will know, well, I know a few of these words already, right? I know egeneto, I know anthropos, I know theou, that sounds like I know that word. You might remember onoma, but we haven't spent a ton of time on it. And then Ioannis is just the guy's name. So if you look at the words that you know in Greek, you can start mapping those back onto their meanings in English. Egeneto. This translation says there came, but we know that means there was born. There came into being. Anthropos, a man. Good. We'll We'll skip the stuff we don't know. This is Theou, so God. So that must be God. Afto is going to be whose in this case. That's the only thing that really matches up, even if we're not familiar with that grammatical usage. And then Ioannis is John. So we've made a good bit of progress already in just reading this. Egeneto anthropos, Theou, Afto, Ioannis, based on the vocab that we already know. And if we look at the English and you read this back and forth, it'll be obvious. Oh yeah, of course, egeneto matches up with there came. Of course, anthropos matches up with a man. And even, grammatically, egeneto anthropos, there came a man. Okay, making some progress here. And this is before we've consulted any kind of resource. We haven't looked at a dictionary. We haven't looked at a lexicon or a grammar guide. We're just looking at the English form of the verse and the Greek form of the verse. What do we do next? Now we can start looking at the words that we don't know. We don't know this word apestamenos. We don't know paratheu. And let's say we don't know onoma. Now, I'm guessing you can look at this and guess what stuff matches up. So who's feeling brave? What do we think apestamenos means? You shout it out. It means sent. It does. Well done. What does paratheu mean? From. Right. Para somehow has to match up with from. And then onoma. That means, nombre, nomen. It means name. Okay, so this is something that you're doing by yourself. You still have not used a lexicon, and I didn't tell you what they mean. This is something that you're able to do based on the fact that you know half the words before coming into it, and then based on sort of placement and some sort of fantastical parallel processing that your brain is doing, you're able to match these things up. Now, you don't really need a lexicon anymore because you have no clue what this is, but it's matching up with sent. Fine. This is actually another preposition. Para is kind of like ek, is, and you might have picked up on that because they're next to each other. And theou isn't indicating possession. There's nothing in the English that seems to indicate possession. So you might have picked up that para is a preposition that governs theos and turns it into its my case. And that's what's going on with para theou and from God. Excellent. And you might have guessed, okay, whose name was John? That sounds like a possessive idea in English. But they're using that weird case that I have not talked to you much about. And you might learn that actually this is one of the uses of that weird case. You can use this to indicate possession, but in certain cases, you will also use this to use possession. I'm not going to get into why that's the case. But what I'm trying to demonstrate to you is this verse has a grammatical structure in it that you're unfamiliar with. But based on your reference to the English, that's not bothering you as much as it would have. If I just asked you, what does this case mean? You can't tell me. But if you see this clause, whose name was John, onoma afto Ioannis, if you just come away with that, saying, I guess that's a thing. So I guess if I said, onoma afto Makarios, that would be like saying whose name was Anand. And it is. It is. That's a perfectly fine Greek usage. And this phrase, this format, onoma afto Jesus, onoma afto o Petros, this shows up a lot in Greek, in the Bible. So if you don't know grammatically exactly what's going on, but you know what it means, then the next time you see, Jesus saw a man, onoma afto Petros, you don't really have to worry about what's going on grammatically. You just know that means his name was Peter. Great, so you've learned something. That's kind of why this approach is so powerful. And as I said, we've not consulted a lexicon. We've not consulted a grammar guide. I'm kind of speeding up this process for you. But the simple thing now would be to cover up the English translation and just read the Greek out loud. Who's brave? Who wants to try reading the Greek out loud? Would you like to try? Okay. I'll repeat it. I'll say it first and then you can repeat it. Egeneto anthropos apestalmenos para theou, onoma afto Ioannis. With a long Greek word like this, it's really helpful to find the accent and make sure that that's kind of anchoring your pronunciation of it. So it's apestamenos paratheo, but there are some long words. Would you like to go?
Egeneton, anthropos, apestamenos, paratheo, onoma, utu,
Afto.
Ioannis.
Ioannis. Excellent. Do you know what that means? You don't have to translate it, but when you read that, do you know what it means?
Yeah.
Okay, I think you do. I think you can test it by uncovering the English and looking at it. I would say that we're done with this verse. If I was studying Greek and I just wanted to do one verse a day, I'm good. Because at this point, the next time I read egeneto anthropos apestamenos paratheo onoma afto Ioannis, I do know what it means. And you can cover this up and read it again, and you know what it all means. You don't know what this form is, and I'm not going to tell you, but you'll see it again. And the next time you see it again, you'll realize, okay, yes, it's something. There's something similar between those two uses. So there's a lot that this alternating approach can do. You don't need any resources at all. And some verses are going to be harder than others, right? So you might look at a verse and say, I do not know a single vocab word. Okay, that's difficult. Then you might start looking at the lexicon. But I would say, don't go to the lexicon as soon as you think you need to. Because my guess is that if I showed you this verse, we're just having lunch or something, you would probably go to the lexicon immediately and kind of skip the fact that you already know half the words in this verse. You're not giving yourself the chance to learn, to really try. But I love this method for that reason. It is very challenging. I'll give you that. And it's difficult to sort of, again, retreat into a child's mindset and be told something is going on grammatically and you don't know what that is, and that's okay. But this is true when we learn English, right? If I asked you, what is an indirect object? Maybe some of you could tell me, maybe some of you can't. But the fact is, indirect objects are one of the most fundamental things in English. You use them all the time. Just because you don't know the fancy grammatical term for it doesn't mean you don't know how to use an indirect object. And it's the same thing with something like onoma afto Ioannis. Obviously, if you have the time, if you're taking like a proper grammar class, you do want to learn these things. But it just depends on how much time you have, how much structure you want, and kind of what's available to you. But I like doing this. And if you do, one verse a day, and that's kind of as far as you need to get, I would say. And then you can just move on. Okay, that's that method. I do want to give you some. Oh yes, hello.
Afto, is that one of those diphthong things, that alpha and the upsilon?
Yes.
How do you say it?
It's
F
off.
sound.
Yeah, it's off in modern Greek.
It's not ow.
It's not out. Yeah, they changed
But
it to off.
if it's the omicron and the upsilon.
Then it's oo. Do we have that?
Yeah,
Ooh.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So here are some proper Greek classes. There's a company called the Ancient Language Institute, and they teach Greek and Hebrew, and I think Old English. They teach a bunch of different languages. I really like their approach. My approach to this class was much more, speaking, reading out loud. It wasn't a ton of like, let's just do grammar and let's memorize vocab. I really like the Ancient Language Institute. They do obviously more grammar and vocab. It's a proper class, and it does cost some money. But they, I think, do a good job of balancing skills like speaking and reading and writing. So they have classes over the summer. They have classes in the fall and spring. Really like those guys. They really know what they're doing. There's an Italian company, or kind of a school, called the Accademia Vivarium Novum. And they are similar, but they go all the way to, they only lecture in the language that you're studying in. This is how I learned Greek. This is how I learned Latin. It is 100% the best way, I would say, to learn these languages, because you get a lot of contact hours. So I took their summer Latin intensive. I think I got, 3 hours a day, 4 days a week for 2 months. And it's just these people speaking Latin to you. And when you speak to them, you have to ask questions and answer questions in Latin. It's brilliant. So they teach Greek, really effective. Very, if you kind of like, okay, you're going to spend some time on something during a summer. But I will say that if you do that, if you kind of sacrifice a whole summer, you will be able to read the Bible in the original Greek by the end of that summer. So there's sort of a misconception, I think, that you need to, do what I did, like get some degrees, spend kind of your whole vocation. It's really not. I mean, a whole summer is a pretty big investment. Um, it's something that I did actually the summer that Faith and I moved here. So we were kind of, doing all that stuff in the meantime. But you can get there faster than you think. I think the resources are extremely important. If you do the summer class here, I think you'd probably be where you want, as they do a textbook that is keyed to the Gospel of John by the time you finish the textbook. This one, it might be a little bit slower. These people are Italian, so you have to deal with a certain whimsy, and they're not as communicative on email and stuff. But it's cheaper, it's more contact time, and like I said, they're only speaking to you in Greek, so you're gonna understand what's going on. And then finally, I do have to shameless plug my own institution. U Dallas has a summer institute, which is just a class where in the summer it's like it's a college class that students take for credit, but I believe anyone can take it. So I'll actually be teaching that this summer. I will be teaching it in a very, very different style. They're not going to let me speak in modern Greek or probably speak much at all. This will be a much more traditional way of learning Greek, the way that you're thinking. We memorize vocab, we learn the grammar rules, we work on translating the text, and it's kind of similar. A lot of these institutions offer summer courses where you compress a whole year of Greek into one summer. So the idea of this class is that once my students are done with it, they can jump right into second year Greek after just having done a summer. So I'll be teaching that this summer. So if you are not sick of my voice, you could sign up for that. There are some more though. So this book that I was referencing, I didn't use it a ton, but I was looking to see what are his priorities and how fast is he going. So this is a book that I would almost wholeheartedly recommend. The only problem is he never uses accents. I read through this and I was waiting for him to introduce accents, and he just never uses them. So I don't like that, because I think that it's important for you to know where the accent is so you can pronounce the word. But the way that he goes through grammar, he uses a ton of verses and just kind of helpful exercises, I think, without overloading you. So this is a book that you can refer to or take a look at. This is my edition of the Gospel of John in Greek and Latin, and it's by these three guys, Hayes, Nimitz, and Grinch. The way that this book works, and you can come up and look at it afterwards. You can come up and look at it afterwards. It is a set of verses, and then this is a sort of traveling lexicon for every word that shows up in this set of verses, and this is grammar notes for some of the more difficult things. I think this is more helpful after you've taken a class that's exposed you to grammar. They have some good grammar explanations at the beginning, but I wouldn't use this right afterwards. It might be a little bit overwhelming, but once you've learned some grammar, it's really helpful, because instead of having to look up a word in the dictionary every time, it just gives you everything you need. So it's a really helpful text. I have a Greek New Testament. This is just a Greek New Testament with nothing else in it. And so I just like to have my regular English Bible and my Greek Bible when I'm studying. And then you can do that alternating verse thing pretty easily. I talked to Crew a little bit about Bibles that are sort of like facing Greek and English. Were you able to get one? Were you? Okay, nice. There are a lot of interlinear Bibles. I don't like those as much, because I think it's a little too easy. I think when your brain is struggling, you just immediately go to the English. You might not give yourself some of that chance to struggle. So I like it when there's a facing text, like English on one side, Greek on another. That's a little bit more difficult. But I will say the very best resources are, you can go to Greece, because the people there speak Greek and they can read the Bible, and it's much easier to immerse yourself if you go there. Of course, that's not always possible. So I would say talk to your fellow church members. I've been to, I guess, 4 or 5 churches in my life, and I've never seen the same density of people that have either studied Greek or have learned it in some way as I've seen here at Bear Creek. So I would say once this class is over, if you know people that studied Greek, or I know some of you guys studied Greek before coming to this class, get together, pick up one of these. I'm sure, based on the level of knowledge that we have, people that are taking classes at seminaries or even have degrees from seminaries, you can definitely get together and do like a Greek book club. So I would say if you're talking to anyone in a Bible study and they use the phrase, well, in the Greek, you got to bother this guy after the Bible study and say, let's do a book club. Let's go through Greek together. And why don't you teach me what's going on? What is apestalmenos? What does it mean? I would say the fact that you have people that go to this church that know Greek, much better than I do, that have spent time on it, spent time studying it. It's a really great resource. And I didn't know that there were people that did that. Growing up, I don't think I was aware that it was a skill that modern living humans possessed. But there are people here at Bear Creek that know this stuff. So don't let them hoard it all to themselves. You got to find those people and make them teach you. Yes.
Which English translation is the closest?
Yeah. That's good. Okay, I was
Translation.
going to transition to question and answer time, and that'll be it. So this is a question that I get a lot. I don't have a satisfying answer. I have heard that the ESV is sort of the modern translation that tries to be literal. I personally just love the KJV. I won't hear a single criticism against it. And what I've actually found is that since learning Greek, I kind of care less about which translation, because if I'm properly studying, I look at a bunch. I start out with the KJV just to help me know what the verse means. Then I'll look at the Greek, and then I'll compare. So I normally compare like the NASB, the ESV, the NIV, and the New King James. If you're studying a passage, as far as what translation that you use in your day-to-day life, I just love the beauty of the King James, but that's people can disagree with that. I have been very privileged to just be given stuff, so I just use the versions that I've given. I've seen there are really good, I think, apologetics resources about manuscripts, the manuscript tradition. Overall, I don't think there's a huge difference. So I know that there are different Greek manuscripts. I use a Latin Bible. I know that there's different Latin manuscripts, but if I'm studying, I'll look at multiple. The ones that I have are just kind of what I've been.
So the Blue Letter Bible has
Oh yeah.
8 Greek verses.
I would say I don't really think they're that different. So I would just pick one and stick with it. I would say like whatever resource you have.
Like I don't even know what they are.
Yeah.
There's more philological. I don't even
right. You could get into it, and if I was going to be a scholar, I think I would care about the differences. From just like a doctrinal point of view, I don't believe that there are any significant differences at all. So I just pick one. Like I said, I use this one on print. There's a website called Greek Bible, which is really good. So I don't get too much into what's the manuscript tradition. I kind of trust that. But I would say just pick one and stick with it. If you're jumping between, it'll probably be difficult. And you should read the KJV, yes.
So, it's a great class. Thank you. You're a great teacher, and really.
This is a question and answer time, Kyle. I just let's see.
What is, so you're obviously very passionate about Greek and languages. Is this purely academic, or has this benefited you spiritually? Has the Lord used this to reveal deeper truth and meaning and beauty about Himself to you? Has it benefited you in that way? If so, can you kind of share?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's benefited me. I mean, I got saved at a young age, so I definitely know that. Like I read these story Bibles back to back, as an elementary school. So it did bring in some pride and some kind of apathy when I was reading the Bible, because I think it's easy to feel like, oh yeah, I know this verse, I know how it's pronounced, like I know what the sermons are on, I know what the commentaries say. So I will say that learning that it was, well, I kind of knew it was written in Greek, but like Greek and Latin and now I'm learning French. Like anytime I pick up a new language, I look at the Bible in that language, and it just kind of excites me. It just kind of motivates me to look at a verse that I've seen 100 times and approach it in a different way. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's like given me some deeper truth. You'll have to ask my wife if it's really made a spiritual difference since I started learning it. I can't go that far, but I do think that there's just a sense of our history that's lost in translation, like just the fact that it's written in another language, and that is a language that is possible to know. There's something there. So like I said, I trust the Holy Spirit when it comes to translation and preserving meaning. I know that God is doing that, but I wouldn't say that learning Greek gives you any kind of like new doctrine or anything. But if you love studying the Bible, if you love getting into it, it's like an extra tool. It's almost like seeing with a new color or something. So it kind of makes these passages vibrant. And I like I said, I've had that problem in the past, just hearing John 3:16 and just kind of checking out. And so I think that learning Greek and whatever language, and kind of using the Bible as a way to get excited, both about the language, but back again about the Bible, because every time you read a translation, you're kind of interacting with a certain Christian's interpretation of the text. And so that's why I was talking to your, to your point about
Right.
translations.
It's almost like it's being passed along.
It is. It has
a game
been.
of telephone
Yeah.
or whatever. You know.
I don't love the telephone example. I don't think that that's quite fair to the scribes. But yes, it has been passed down. And if you believe that these people were Christians that had the Holy Spirit, and you can kind of look back, there's no deception going on. I love that. I think that excites me to like study the Bible and read it. And yeah, every so often you find something that isn't in a translation because it's not possible to do. But as I said in the first class, I don't want to overstate like the spiritual elitism of learning Greek. I don't at all want to give that impression. But the way that a missionary explained it to me once was that the meaning is the same, but the words have more power. You're just giving more languages an opportunity to convict you. So that's how I would answer that question. Did you have a question?
I was going to say, so last couple of years, the New English Translation, NET,
Yes.
has
Okay.
great footnotes that if you understand, if you have a little understanding of the tenses and the grammar,
Yeah.
they go into it. They'll say,
Nice.
this is this, and so you start getting some of the stuff you talked about
Yeah.
in the footnotes. It's
Definitely.
not there, I
Yeah.
don't know about the translation, but they have like all the Greek translator notes.
Nice.
Of like,
Okay.
I wasn't sure whether this should be this, but
Sure,
this is the
sure.
tense, and they go into great detail. I really like
Yes. Thank you for reminding me about the NET. I
Yeah.
forgot about that. That's another good study one. And there are a lot of really solid resources out there. That's not my area of expertise, so you might have to ask someone else. But yeah, I would still say that if you know the Greek, you can appreciate those footnotes a little bit
that.
more.
Right.
You're not
So you
learning
know-
about Greek by reading a translator's footnotes because you kind of already know what he's
So you
talking
have to
about.
know about all the cases and
Something
this
like that.
is in that case,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you all of a sudden go, oh, okay.
Yeah. Any other questions before we end out? Who's going on that Greece-Turkey trip besides? Yeah. I would say that's helpful. As I said, modern Greeks can read the Bible. So if you learn modern Greek, you'll be able to read the Bible. It just takes a little while. All right. If there's no other questions, Irini, Imin, peace to you all. Really, it's quite the achievement. And I do want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity. The lectures will be here. The resources will be here. And as far as the lectures or the resources that I mentioned, I'll put this video up online. So if you want to look through what was that book called or that class. And if anyone wants to take the summer class at UDallas, it won't be as much fun as this, but you'll learn more over time. Thank you very much. You're all dismissed. Really appreciate it.
That was great.
Barakallah.